You might not have known this, but an alarm went off. And if you didn't hear that alarm, it's good you came tonight. Because that is the alarm of 24 hours before Yom Hadin Kal Nidre. This is not something you can simply just walk into. Yom Kippur is not a holiday. It's a journey. And like any good trip, you have to really prepare properly. You have to show up prepared with the proper mindset so that you'll be able to own it for what it really has to offer. So tonight, the countdown begins. The alarm went off 24 hours before the greatest day of the year. And that's a calling for me and you. What are we going to do with the biggest day, the biggest opportunity of this year? What's going to happen? We walk in on the great moment of Yom Kippurim, and we experience this amazing face-to-face encounter with Borei Olam. Hashem says, I waited all year just to see you. I waited all year just to hear from you, just to talk to you, just to be able to connect with you. But this is a connection like no other. I think if a person stops for a minute, we've mentioned in last night's class an idea. And I want to start with it because that's going to be the springboard of what we really want to hit on tonight. There's this incredible idea. We're going to be saying Vidui 5 times. We're going to be saying the words, Al chet shechatanu lefanecha. Hashem, I feel terrible. I sinned. Lefanecha. Now, if you stop for a minute, you think, Al chet shechatanu lefanecha? Do I really need the word lefanecha? Wouldn't it also make sense to just say, Al chet shechatanu be zadon, al chet shechatanu bishgaga, al chet shechatanu betimhon levav. What is this lefanecha? Of course lefanecha. I'm talking to you, Hashem. Who else am I talking to? Who else am I confessing in front of? Lefanecha. So what is this word doing there? This word is to tell me and you what this day is all about. This day is about lefanecha. Do you know that bigger than the sin itself, you know what was worse than actually doing the sin? I did it in front of you, Hashem. I didn't realize that I was standing and facing right in front of you. And I sinned anyways. And for the fact that I sinned demonstrates that it must be I forgot at that moment I was standing in front of you. Because if I realized that I was standing in front of God at that moment, who would ever have done that Averah? So if I did the Averah, you know what I forgot? Lefanecha. I forgot that I stand in front of you and that you're in front of my face, you're in front of me at all times. Wow. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha. We expanded on this last night with great length. And I think this is a good way to open up tonight's talk. It's not just what I did wrong, it's that I did it in front of you. It's not just that I went and ate what I shouldn't have eaten, but I ate it in front of your face. It's not just that I went and spoke Lashon Hara Rechilut. I spoke it about your kids right in front of you. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha. That's where I went wrong. How did I forget that I was standing right in front of you? How did I forget lefanecha? And because of that, maybe even more than to confess on the sin itself, I have to confess on the chutzpah that went behind the doing of the sin. That I did it in your face, Hashem, in front of you. Like we said, this is the amazing idea. Modeh ani lefanecha. I wake up in the morning, you know what the first thing I say out of my mouth? I don't say Modeh ani lecha. Thank you, Hashem. No, I say thanks in front of you. Why am I saying thanks in front of you when I'm talking to you? No, my friend, you missed the point. The first words out of your mouth when you wake up in the morning is this very big, loud reminder. Remember that you are in front of Hashem. Modeh ani. I thank the fact that I am in front of you. And therefore, when I sinned, I forgot I was in front of you. And that's why I come and I say, Al chet shechatanu lefanecha. I feel terrible. What did I do? I was right in front of you, Hashem, and I went and I sinned. How did I do that? What was I thinking? You were looking me straight in the eye, and I went and I did that anyways. How could I do such a thing? This is a tremendous idea to take into the Chag, because this is the experience of Yom Kippurim. It's a lefanecha experience like no other day of the year. The rabbis tell us that Hashem comes to me and you on this day so close, so close. It's literally, the mashal that they give is like one person leaning in to whisper a secret into somebody's ear, where you can feel the breath off of his lips onto your earlobe. That's how close a person comes to his friend when he leans in to tell a secret. That's how close Hashem comes to us on Yom Kippur. He's literally coming to us with a hug. I waited all year just for this. What are you going to do with this encounter? What are you going to do with this great lefanecha opportunity? This is the day that Hashem comes to us like a mother. You know, if you ever watch, you'll realize it's very difficult for even a woman to change a bad diaper of a baby that's not hers. And that's why sometimes when I go to these nurseries to drop off my grandkids, I stop for a minute and I ask myself, is this lady really going to be able to take care of this baby even though it's not hers in a way that a mother would? It's not simple. But what's amazing is when it comes to your own baby, when it comes to your own child, you'll be able to clean up the worst diaper and it doesn't affect the mother at all. Matter of fact, it's amazing how moms are not affected in any way. Not the smell, not the stench, just the opposite. They're googling and goggling with the baby. And then after that, they powder up the baby. And then after that, they slap on the cream. I sound like I know what I'm talking about. And then after that, they pick up the baby and they play with the baby. I mean, it's an unbelievable experience to watch this. Meanwhile, the mom is cleaning the baby with such love. The Zohar HaKadosh writes that Yom Kippur is begeder not just Abba, but also Ima. The Zohar HaKadosh. He says, yes, there is an Abba concept, but there's also an Ima concept. And the way the Balei Darshanim explained that Ima concept, like a mother who comes to clean her own child, with all the stench and all the dirt, and then after she powders, and after she creams, and after she cleans the clothes and changes the clothes, that's what Hashem does for us on Yom Kippur. He gives us a cleansing that we've been waiting all year for. And He does it like a mother, only a mother would know how to do for her own child, her own baby. Could you imagine this opportunity? We're 24 hours away from a day that we're going to be looking, Kivyachol, Hashem in the face. And He's coming so close. And He's coming to cleanse us in a way that a cleansing that we need and overdue and desperate for. And He comes with such love to give that cleansing. Says Borei Olam, I just want you to recognize that I'm right here in front of you and that I'm ready to do anything you need on this day in this encounter. Talk to me. Pour your heart out to me. Whatever it is you need, this is the day to cry out, Abba, we're so close. Oy, do I need your help? Oy, thank you for the cleansing. Thank you for the encounter. Thank you for the opportunity. But more than anything, thank you for listening. He puts His ear, Kivyachol, up to your lips to listen. And He hangs on your every word on this day. And He wants to hear, Ma ko'ev licha, Ma ko'evet lach. What's bo'er? What's going on? What's your issues? What's hurting you? What's helping you? What do you need more of? What do you need less of? What do you want to go away? What do you want to make more? What's going on with your kids? What's going on with your marriage? What's going on with your husband, your wife? I'm here to help you today. Because this is the day that I can change it all. This is the day that I'm ready to work and change anything you need. And that's the experience. Ki bayom hazeh yichaper. Yeah, that we say it again and again and again. You know why? Because ki bayom hazeh, this day. By the way, this is a pasuk. Ki bayom hazeh, this day. What's so special about this day? Ki bayom hazeh yichaper alechem. I'm here to forgive you, kapara. Litaher etchem. I'm going to cleanse you. Mikol chatotechem, from all the averot. How, Hashem? How? Tell me how. How are you going to do it? How am I going to do it? Lifnei Hashem titharu. Because you're standing lifnei Hashem and recognizing and connecting to the opportunity of lifnei Hashem brings the titharu. It brings the cleansing. That brings the kapara. Recognizing the opportunity and grabbing it with two hands. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a day that we need to own. You need to own this day. You need to come in with this day with a certain mindset. A mindset that when you count the minutes of Yom Kippur, it's as if you're counting diamonds. And every moment you can be po'el on that minute, what you can't do months and months during the year. Keep that in mind. Keep in mind that every minute has embedded a power that you'll be able to do things on this day in one moment that would take normally a month or two during the year to try to come close to what we can do on 1 minute of Yom Kippur. Would you waste those moments? Would you spend those moments haki balash with the guy next to you? Would you be looking around and talking to people about, how come this year they sat me on the right side of the shul? Every year they sit me on the left. Enough. Don't lose out. Don't be misled by the whole beauty, the glory. We are supposed to connect to Lifnei Hashem. Titharu. And that's the moment of an incredible tahara. I want to tell you my Ne'ilah speech in advance. And that's a no-no, because there's a few guys here that are probably going to be here for Ne'ilah, and probably a few ladies as well. So if Hashem doesn't give me a different speech, this is it. There was a couple who didn't have children for over 10 years. And it hit a point where the husband turns to the wife and says, I don't think we're going to have children. We tried everything, every sigula, every prayer, we did it all. Nothing. He turns to his wife and says, I'm afraid that we might have to actually go different ways. Maybe Hashem will bless us with different partners, different spouses. The wife looks at the husband and says, how could you even talk that way? She begins to break down crying, and she starts to pray. And such a tefillah came out of her at that moment, that her husband watching was so inspired that he too jumped in and started praying with her. Together, husband and wife, standing wall to wall in their room, crying and praying and begging Hashem. A few days later, it was Rosh Hashanah. And the night of Rosh Hashanah, this husband, he has this amazing dream. He finds himself standing in this garden. Now, the garden had these beautiful trees, but he happened to have been standing next to a tree that looked very barren. It was a tree that was just basically a bark, no branches, no fruit, no leaves. Now, all the other trees in the garden were lush. They were blossoming with fruit and flowers and leaves and branches, but the tree he was standing next to was very barren. He realized, I know why I'm standing next to this tree. This must be my tree. This tree didn't give off any fruit, didn't give off any vegetation. This is my tree. The tree that didn't give off any children. But all the other trees are blossoming with so much fruit and so much vegetation. And he looks at his tree, his hazit tree, with absolutely nothing on it. And he says, this is my tree. No fruit, no children. Just then, Malach, an angel, comes into the garden, and the angel is walking holding a bucket of water. And he watches this father in the dream. He's watching as the angel is going from tree to tree, and he's pouring water at the bark of each one of these beautiful trees. And as he pours the water out of the bucket, the tree begins to grow even more right there on the spot. More fruit pop out and more vegetation comes out. And the father starts getting all excited. He sees that the angel is going around from tree to tree, and on every tree that he's watering from the water from this bucket, the trees are giving off fruit. So he starts to signal to the angel, come here, come to my tree, pour a little bit of that stuff on my tree. Maybe it'll blossom. Maybe I'll have some fruit. Maybe I'll have a child. But the angel ignores him. And the angel just continues going from tree to tree, pouring out the bucket of water on all the trees, as if he's not there. Till finally the angel walks up to his barren tree. And the angel looks right at the father, and he puts the bucket down on the floor. And the father says, "Oh, please." The angel opens up a little bag, and he pulls out a cup of water. And he pours the cup of water onto this little barren bark of tree. All of a sudden, one fruit pops out. The father got so happy. He turns to the angel. Thank you. I'm going to have a kid. And he wakes up. And he wakes up from the dream. And he's elated. And he didn't know what to do with himself. He wakes up his wife. He tells her, listen to the dream I just had. I just had a dream. And to me, the way I understand this dream, after telling her all the detail, I think it means we're going to have a child this year. The wife could not contain herself. She said, listen, it sounds great, but please go ask your Rebbe. See what he says. See if he agrees that that's really what the dream means. So the next day he goes and asks his Rebbe, and he tells him the whole dream with the angel and the bucket and the one tree and the barren, the cup of water, the whole thing. Wow. The angel. Something popped out. You want to tell him? A fruit popped out. Rebbe, what does that mean? Does it mean that I'm going to have a child? His Rebbe looks at him and says, yeah, you're right. That means that you're going to have a child this year. And that child is going to light up the entire world with Torah. He's going to be from the greatest rabbis of the generation. The father heard this. He couldn't contain himself. The father turns to the Rebbe and says, but Rebbe, I don't understand. Why didn't the angel pour the water from the bucket on my tree? How come he poured the water on all the other trees? When it came to my tree, he puts the bucket down, he pulls out this cup of water from a bag, and he pours it. What's that? Why didn't he just put it from the... What was a cup of water? What was that symbolizing? Said the Rebbe, you got a mistake. In the bucket there was water. But the cup that the angel pulled out, that wasn't water. Those were the tears. Those were the tefillot of you and your wife. There was no water in the bucket for your tree. But the only water that was able to be added to bring forth this child was only the tears in that cup. Those tears, when poured on your barren tree, brought forward a child. And that year, they had a son, who today we know as Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And the father in the story was none other than Yochai. And the Rebbe that he went to make sure he had the detail of the dream proper was none other than Rebbe Akiva. And this is the story how Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the Rashbi, was brought into the world from a set of parents who didn't have children for over a decade. But because, not the water in the bucket, but because of the tears. The angel had the tears in the cup to be able to pour on that barren tree, to be able to bring into the world one of the greatest rabbis to ever live. You can't underestimate this opportunity. When a Jew rattles his heart and breaks through and decides that we're going to give it our all, we're going to drop the tears, we're going to literally give everything we can to the tefillot of this great day, on the encounter of this great moment. And it's there looking at you in the face. Ki bayom hazeh yichaper alechem. How? Lifnei Hashem titaru. I am right here in front of your face. You know, every year when it comes time for Ni'ilah, do you know what I tell the guys? I tell them, take your talet and put it over your head. And like this, you'll enter your own zone. At that moment, there's nobody else around. There's no one looking at you. There's no one in front of you. There's no one behind you. There's no one sitting next to you. There's no rabbi, no chazan, no clock. There's no fast. There's nothing but you and Hashem. Underneath that talet. Lifnei Hashem titaru. I'm looking at you in the face, Hashem. You're looking at me in the face. We're literally hugging each other, crying on each other's shoulders. Abba, this is what I need this year, please. I have problems, I need help. Help me. Here are my issues. Number 1, number 2, number 3. I need your help. Drop those tears. Those tears go into their own cup. They don't go into the regular bucket of nature. Those tears are the tears of Yeshuot. And Hashem collects those tears on Yom Kippur, and He sprinkles back those tears on you during the year when you need the Yeshuot. So even someone who maybe wasn't worthy to get that Yeshuah, and really they weren't part of the bucket of water, but they have their own separate cup of tears. And that will be there for you all year. When is the collection of those tears? Tomorrow night. On the day of Yom Kippur. And specifically by Musaf. And forget about it. Ne'ilah, the biggest of the biggest. Hashem says, I just want to grab with you one of those real moments that you can crack that heart of stone and give me a tear. And show me that you believe that you're standing in front of me. Ay, 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 al chet shechatanu lefanecha. Don't ever forget that. It's one thing that I did the sin, but I did it in front of you. So now I need a day to come right in front of your face, midah keneged midah, to ask forgiveness for the sins that I did right in front of your face. Did you get that? The averot that I did all year were lifanecha, and I didn't realize. So I need a day, one day a year, that's the lifanecha experience, to put me back in a cognizant position of an absolute lifanecha. I'm in front of you because of all those sins that I did in front of your face. Now I need the opportunity to ask mechila in front of your face. Now I need the opportunity to say vidui in front of your face. To fix all the chutzpah, the sins that I did, that I forgot I was standing in front of your face. This is a powerful idea. This is lifnei Hashem titaru. When you realize and you connect to the lifnei Hashem, that's the moment of titaru. We need to own this. Forgive me for talking a little bit rash. But now's not the time to sleep. You're not going to be able to make up this day another day of the year. Yom Kippur is not a holiday. It's a journey. It's an experience. You leave this world starting tomorrow night, like a trip. And you go to a place that's very high and very lofty, and you mingle with the angels for 24 hours, and then you come back down to earth after Ne'ilah. That's Yom Kippur. Are you just going to walk into it without preparation? Was there ever a trip you went on without preparation? Was there ever a time you just jumped into the car and said, heck, let's see where the highway takes us? Now, there are people like that. I have a few friends. Okay, whatever. But typically, people, we have a destination. We know where we're going. We know what we need. We know what to bring. We know what to pack. We know what we're in for. You're about to take the biggest trip of your life tomorrow night. You need to prepare for that trip. You need to realize that the essence of the experience is a lifanecha experience. Lifnei Hashem titaru. Prepare yourself. You're coming face to face with your Maker. That's not simple. My Rebbe once told me, he said to me, one of the greatest experiences when a father is right outside the door and his wife is giving birth, especially to that first child. And he told me this in Hebrew once. He said the place that a guy meets his Maker for the first time is right there outside the door in the delivery room. Some of us remember that experience. It's so tangible, God's presence there. It's not normal. And the emotions, off the charts. Wow, you never forget that. Not the mother nor the father forgets that first child born, that first moment. It's unbelievable. You feel Hashem's presence. Do you know that on Yom Kippur, the opportunity for that feeling is greater than even the birth of a child? We just need to tap into it. We need to be real with this. So let me tell you this crazy story. A guy from Lakewood, some of you might have heard this story from me over the years. It's a little hard to keep track who heard what and where. I was just, Motzei Shabbat, I was by the Az Yashir Shul for the Bukharian community. And I'm about to get up to speak, and one young guy walks up to me and says to me, "Rabbi, you nervous? Do you get nervous?" I said, "Do I get nervous? I'm already nervous." He says, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Why are you nervous?" I said, "I'll tell you why I'm nervous. I'm nervous because when I get up, I have no idea if what I'm about to say you already heard at a different time, in a different venue, in a different place. The last thing anyone wants to be is a rerun. That's for sure. But I'm hoping that the inspiration of the point and the feeling of the terms will be able to bring out from us a change. Because we're looking here tonight to change. We need to believe in the experience in order for it to be real. We need to believe in the tefillot in order for them to be real. We need to believe that there's nobody else but Hashem that's able to save us and our problems on this Yom Kippur, and this is our last ditch effort. And if you feel that and you believe that, boy, will you grab this opportunity. That's the mindset. That's how you go in to own the tefillot of Yom Kippur. Listen to this incredible story that you might have heard. Forgive me if you did. But I want to tell you about Marty Schwartz. Marty, he was very close with his mom. And he'd visit her in the old age home in Lakewood, New Jersey. Every single morning he'd have breakfast with mom. And that was really special about Marty. Even Shabbat morning, he'd come in and have breakfast with mom. And this would go on week after week, month after month. And mom would actually wait every morning to have breakfast with her son. Well, one night, Marty gets a phone call. "Mr. Schwartz, I'm sorry to tell you, but I have bad news. Your mom just passed away. Please, make arrangements for a funeral. Make arrangements for a burial plot. Make arrangements because tomorrow morning we'll have the paperwork waiting for you by the front desk. And you'll tell us what time the funeral is. What time will the hearse pull up?" Marty's like, his jaw drops. He's like, "What do you mean? I was just with mom this morning. I had breakfast with her this morning. She looked great. I mean, mom was mom. That's so sudden, such a shock." Well, it is what it is. Baruch Dayana Emet. Marty calls up the rabbi from the Young Israel over there in Lakewood. He says, "Rabbi, I'm asking you please, I need a proper hesped for my mother, a eulogy. She was a good woman." He starts to tell the rabbi about his mother. And he says, "Rabbi, how do I buy a plot in the Jewish cemetery off the Route 70? The rabbi gives him the phone number. He calls up the cemetery. $12,500 later, Marty buys a plot for his mom. The next morning he comes to the old age home, fills out the paperwork. The hearse is already outside. Mom was already placed in the coffin and brought out. And off to the Young Israel for the levaya, for the funeral. Marty stands up and he pours his heart out and cries. He talks about his mother. Then he had the rabbi stand up and give a beautiful eulogy about the life of an Eshet Chayil, of such a wonderful lady, Mrs. Schwartz. And then when the funeral was over, everybody walked behind the hearse and out to the Route 70 it went. And then they carried Marty's mom to her resting spot. They buried her and said Kaddish. And that was it. Very sad, very unfortunate. What a shock. Marty goes home that evening and he sits Shiva, and he's sitting on the floor, and neighbors are coming in, and people are delivering foods, and Mitaskim is there with the little chairs, and they're setting up, and they're giving him the hand to sit the 7 days of Shiva. And as people are coming in, the phone in the kitchen rings. Now Marty's sitting. Marty lives alone. So he turns to one of his friends and he says, could you do me a favor, just answer the phone in the kitchen? It's probably somebody calling to send their condolences. So his friend picks up the phone and he says, hello, who's this? And then he says, who? Who? This is a joke? Hang on just 1 second, please. He walks into the living room where Marty is sitting on the floor in Shiva, and he's holding the phone, and he turns to Marty and he says, Marty, I don't know how to tell you this. Your mom's on the phone. Marty looks at his friend and says, that's a bad joke. It's a really, really tasteless, bad joke. You don't make jokes like that when someone's sitting Shiva. Come on. He says, Marty, I would never. But your mom's on the phone. Bro. No, that's what he said. But he said, your mom's on the phone. Marty says, give me the phone. Marty gets on the phone. Hello? Who is this? Marty, this is your mother. Ma? Ma, it's you. Ma, where you calling from? Okay, maybe you didn't say that. You know. Ma, is that really you? What's going on, Ma? I don't get it. Ma. He whispers into the phone. Ma, you died this morning. We had a eulogy. We made a big funeral. You should have heard the rabbi talk about you, Ma. I buried you on the 70, Ma. What's going on? Marty, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm right here in my room. You didn't come this morning for breakfast. I waited and waited. I got worried. I thought maybe something happened to you. You thought something happened to me? Marty, I'm worried about you. Are you okay? He says, Ma, something's wrong. Where are you? I'm right here in my room. I'm in the same room that you visited me in the day before and the day before that. I'm in room 179, bed A. I'm here. You want to come over and check? I'd love to see you. I didn't get to see you today. Marty jumps off that little stool. And he runs outside and jumps into his car, rips down the block and goes over to the old age home. He comes running down the hallway. He runs into his mother's room. And there's Mom! He says, Mom, what are you doing here? So what are you talking about? I live here. This is where you sit with me every day. Mom, they called me last night and they told me that you died. I made a funeral today for you. $12,500 later, I bought a plot on the 70 and we buried you. What's going on? And she looks at her son and she says, I didn't pass away last night. God forbid, Marty. My roommate passed away last night. Marty runs down the hall and he finds the nurse that called him the night before. And he says, I think a big mistake was made here. And the nurse says, what's the matter? You called me last night. You told me my mother died. I don't get it. My mother's in the room. Who did I bury this morning? The nurse says, oh my gosh. She runs to our file cabinet. She goes through the files. She pulls out the file and she starts looking through the paperwork and she says, oh, you're right. I'm so sorry. by mistake, instead of calling the next of kin of room 179, bed B, I mixed it up and I called the next of kin of room 179, bed A. It wasn't your mom that passed away last night. It was her roommate, Mrs. Weiss, the other woman. Marty says, one second, let me get this. You mean the lady that I picked up in the coffin this morning was not my mom, because she's in the room, I get that. But then I made a eulogy for her, and then I buried her. I buried a stranger. Oh my gosh, how am I going to tell the family that they missed out on their mom's funeral? He goes back and he sits in front of his mom and he says, Mom, you're not going to believe this. I'm going to have to call now Mrs. Weiss's family and tell them that I buried their mom without them knowing that she passed away. They made a terrible mix-up. Marty's mother says, Marty, Mrs. Weiss only has a daughter. And I don't know if you really want to call her. She's a little bit crazy. He says, what do you mean? She says, well, the truth is they didn't speak for over 10 years. And only the last few years they did speak, but it wasn't too pleasant. I used to listen to those conversations. I don't know if you want to call her. Marty says, but I have no choice. I buried her mom and she wasn't invited to the funeral. That's terrible. I got to call. Marty calls the daughter of Mrs. Weiss and he tells her, hey, I don't know how to break this to you. Terrible mix-up. The old age home last night, but instead of calling you, they called me. You see, my mom and your mom were roommates. I hate to break to you the news, but your mom passed away last night. And you're not going to believe this, but I thought it was my mom. So I actually made a funeral for her. And I actually had the rabbi get up and give a beautiful eulogy. And then after that, I bought a plot, $12,500 in the cemetery, Jewish cemetery on the 70, and I buried your mom. At least you should know that she had a beautiful Jewish burial. Until now, it was all silence. Just then, Marty hears Weiss's daughter say, shh, wow, my mom, she is lucky. Lucky they called you. Marty said, what? What do you mean? If they would have called me, says the daughter of Mrs. Weiss, I'd have one word on my tongue: cremation. I was going to have her cremated. Marty said, wow, she's Mishnu. You going to do that to your mom? Yes. You don't understand. I told my mom, I'm waiting for the day for them to call me and tell me she dies so I can get my revenge. Marty's saying, holy, what are you talking about? How could you talk about your mom like that? She says, when I was a young girl, I went off to college and I came home with a boy who wasn't Jewish. I loved him, an Italian boy. And I told my mom, Mom, I'm marrying this boy. And my mom told me, we could never be family if you marry him. I could never come to such a wedding. I could never be part of such a family. Please don't make this terrible mistake. I said, Mom, you come to the wedding or not, I'm marrying him. And I went and I married him. And me and my mom after the wedding didn't speak for over 10 years. She says right after that, her Italian husband got into an accident and he died. And she said, I lost him. I had no one to talk to. So I had no choice. So after so many years, I call up my mom out of the blue and tell her that my husband died. It was probably because of her prayers. And then I say, Mom, you're the only one I got. So from now on, we'll talk. But I'm just telling you, Mom, I'll never forgive you. And the day they call me and tell me that you passed away, I am only going to bring you cremation. Marty hears this and he hangs up the phone and he says, wow, it's good they called me and they didn't call the Mejnune. I mean, that was, I understand now what happened. He turns to his mother and he says, Ma, you're not going to believe it. I just called the daughter. And you're right. She's like, whoa. She would have cremated her mother. Marty's mom says, yeah, Marty, that's what I was trying to tell you. You don't understand. She says, every night I would hear my roommate, Mrs. Weiss. She would sit on a Tehillim and she would pray her heart out before going to sleep. And she would cry. And she would say, Hashem, I have no one else but you. Not even my own daughter will give me a proper burial. Not even my own daughter will give me a proper eulogy with a proper rabbi. Hashem, I have no one else but you. I beg of you, Hashem, when you decide to take my soul back, when you decide to take my life, I beg of you, I'm relying on you to give me a proper funeral with a eulogy of a proper rabbi and a burial in a Jewish cemetery. Please save me. And she prayed this every night for years. And sure enough, the night she passes, by mistake, the nurse, instead of calling the next of kin in room 179, bed B, ends up calling the next of kin, room 179, bed A, Marty Schwartz, who then goes, thinking it's mom, and gives her a Jewish beautiful funeral in a shul with an upright rabbi. And $12,500 later, a plot in the 70 in the Jewish cemetery, a beautiful and proper burial for a Jewish woman. Why? Because she understood that nobody else can save her other than Hashem. And this is a tremendous mindset that a person needs to prepare and walk into Yom Kippurim with. There is nobody else but you, Hashem. No one can do a thing for me. No one can give me anything. No one can take away anything. Everything is only you, Hashem. I'm going to grab this moment, this face-to-face encounter. Lifanecha malkeinu reikam al teshivenu. When I find the lifanecha, reikam al teshivenu, then the tefillot never come back empty. Then they're always answered. A new pshat. But remember, lifnei Hashem titaru. We come in with a reverence. We come in with a certain feeling. I am standing closest to Hashem now than any other moment of the year. I'm going to use this 24 hours of Yom Kippur to connect to Borei Olam like never before and pour my heart out. And pour my heart out. Listen to me well. This is not going to come out now too poetic or flowery, because I want the point to hit home strong. You need to own the tefillot of Yom HaKippurim. You need to come into Yom HaKippurim like a fighter. You need to fight your way through everything that's going to hold you back from giving the best prayer you can give. Every word is already a torpedo to heaven. Every sentence that you're going to say is a grenade that is thrown up the Shamayim and makes explosions on the day of Yom Kippurim. We need to go in with an attitude that I'm going to rip this. This is mine. This is my opportunity. Because if I don't do it now, I won't be able to do it for this year. So make the list. What is it that you need? What is it that you don't need in your life that's there a hindrance? What's holding you back from being the real you? What's holding back your children from thriving? What's holding back your marriage? What's holding back everything in the world that you need to become the biggest of you? And put it down on a paper. and come in and knock out the points and beg for them, and it'll be given to you. Because the more you get real with these tefillot, the more you demonstrate that you believe that you are lifnei Hashem. And the more I could really show that I believe I'm lifanecha, I'm standing in front of you, and I am lifnei Hashem, and I feel your presence, and I feel your closeness, that's the mechanism of titaru. That's what cleanses you. That's the cleansing. It's the moment of connection. You got to find that moment of connection, and I am telling you from experience from years, you got to fight for it. It doesn't come easy. There's going to be distractions in shul, I'm telling you right now. Some people, the rustling of the chairs bother them. They can't deal with it. Other people, they're always somehow or other every year placed to sit right next to somebody with allergies. And it drives them out of their mind. The guy next to me, the whole Kippur was sniffling and sniffling and sniffling and sniffling. Hajjabah already. Let me pray for 5 minutes. I'm telling you, these things are going to happen. There's always going to be something there to throw you off. And it's there on purpose. Because you need to fight for this. But I tell you, if you do fight for it, you'll own it. You'll find that moment of connection, and it will be an experience that is beyond this world. And that moment, don't hold back. When you get on the Wi-Fi, you gotta pour it out and say everything you need. And when the tears are rolling, everything comes out of the heart. Don't hold back. Who cares who's looking at you? Who cares about the guy next to you or the guy behind you? Who cares? The whole year is in this basket. I need to make this work. I need to make this count. I know I'm coming off very different than when I typically speak. I know that. Usually I'm a nice guy, I'm polished. Tonight I'm a little bit crazy. I know I sound that way. And I beg your forgiveness. I beg your forgiveness. I hope you go home tonight and you hear a previous class. Oh, that's the guy. Who was that? Who's that guy? I'm telling you, there's a reason why I'm doing this. Because I got to literally joggle people to explain to them that if you're not going to man up for this, you're not going to deliver what you can have on the biggest opportunity of the year. Right in the beginning of the Holocaust, there was a few boys, a few children, that somehow or other King George from England, he negotiated something that later on in history was known as the Kinder Transport. Those of you who know a little bit of history know exactly what I'm talking about. These were children, Jewish children from Berlin, from Germany, who were negotiated and allowed to leave Germany on the onset of the Holocaust and brought over by boat to England. There in England, they were cared for. They were given clothing. They were put up in room and shelter. They were brought to English schools. There was an Israeli man who got on the radio in Israel a few years back, and he was describing how he was one of those children. And he was giving over the experience. And listen to what he said. If you open your heart and hear just this, your Yom Kippur will never be the same. He says this was the experience as one of the children of the Kinder Transport. He says when we got to England, we were accepted very warmly. We were given new clothing. We were brought to these little dormitories. And we started school together, and they kept us together. And each child was kind of a support for the next. We were friends, everybody. We started to get to the realization that although we heard terrible things were happening back home in Germany, but at least we were lucky enough to survive. One day our teacher walks in, says the old man, and she announces that tomorrow is the big parade. And at this parade, everyone's going to get an opportunity to meet none other than King George himself. You're going to get to meet the King of England, King George. When we heard that, we were like, we couldn't believe it. We're going to get to talk to the King of England. At least we'll get to tell him thank you for bringing us over, for saving us, the kinder transport. The old man says, my friend, he was especially really worked up about this. He says, I remember that night he couldn't sleep, my friend. All night he was sitting there with a pad and he was writing down exactly what is he going to say to the king? What is he going to say to King George? How to thank him? What to say? And he's been writing all night. He was so worked up and so ready for that moment that he gets to talk to the king. He knows exactly what he's going to tell him the next day by the parade. And then the old man says the next day came. And he says, we all came out to the main street in the center of London. And it was all already lined with policemen. And everyone was behind the barricades. And we lined up as a school. And we sat there and we listened. And we waited for the big moment. I turned to my teacher, says the old man, and I asked my teacher, tell me, when's the king coming? We saw all types of floats. We saw all types of National Guards. But where's the king? Where's the king? And my teacher told me, don't worry. When the king passes by, you'll know it. You'll know it. You'll know it. From the clapping, from the cheering, you'll know. From the ra'ash, you'll know it. You'll know it's the king. Don't worry. He says a few minutes go by, and suddenly we hear this commotion. It sounded like a whole commotion of clapping and screaming and cheering. And it wasn't that far away. So we started to look down the block and we could start to see the royal motorcade. The motorcade of the king. And behind all the black cars, there was one white car. And we understood that that was the king. The king is coming down the block now. My friend whipped out his little paper and started going over all the points that he's going to tell the king when he gets his chance to speak to the king. And then as the king's motorcade goes by, everyone pulls out their little flags that we made in school, and we start to blow the whistles, and we shake out the flags, and we say, long live the king! And suddenly my friend realized, this is a parade. We're not getting to speak to the king. All you do is wave from a distance. And maybe behind his tinted windows, he might actually saw you for a split second. We don't actually get to speak to the king. My friend was so angry. He was up all night preparing. What is he going to tell King George? He said, what? He turns to the teacher, I'm not going to get to speak to him? She says, no, you just wave your flag. He says, wave my flag? From a distance? No way! And just then, my friend did the most crazy thing in the world. He jumped over the barricade. He ran out in the middle of the street, and he ran right in front of King George's limo. And he went with his hands like this. Stop! The police saw this kid, a 7-year-old Jewish kid in the middle of the street, standing in front of the king's car. They ran up and they grabbed the kid and they started schlepping him. Kid, are you out of your mind? You just stopped the king's car. And they're pulling him and schlepping. The kid says, no, I got to talk to the king. I got to talk to the king. And as they're schlepping him away, the back window starts to go down. And suddenly the face of King George peeks out of the window and says, gentlemen, I'd like to bring that lad, that boy over here. They bring the boy over. Says the old man, I couldn't believe it. My crazy, out of his mind friend. But he's talking to the king. He's talking to the king. He's speaking to the king. They spoke for a few minutes. He pulled out his paper. He went through a few points that he wanted to tell the king. And then right after that, the king smiled and nodded. The window went back up. And my friend turned around and ran back to our class, jumped back over the barricade. And my teacher turned to him and said, "Are you crazy?" He said, "No, I'm not crazy. I spoke to the king." Says the old man on the radio in Israel, "We went back to school, and that was it." A few weeks later, my friend, the crazy one, the one that jumped in the middle of the street and stopped the king's car, he was called into the principal's office. I said, "Oh, now you're going to get it." The principal sits him down and asks him, "Tell me, when you did that crazy thing and jumped in the middle of the street and stopped the king's car, when you were chatting with the king, what did you say to the king?" He says, "Well, I told the king, thank you for saving my life. You brought us over as Jewish children in the Kinder transport. But I also said to the king, please, your majesty, it's not enough just me. What am I, a child without parents? Please, my parents are still back there in Germany. Could you see if you could help them?" And he asked me my parents' name. And he asked me where my parents lived and what their address was. And what city and where part of Berlin were my parents from. And then he nodded and he smiled. And I thanked him. I thanked him just for letting me talk to him. I thanked him. The principal is, he's shaking his head back and forth. He says, "Kid, you're crazy. But I want to tell you something. Your craziness paid off. The king just sent you a present." And just then, from the back room, the door opens. And the boy's parents walk out. And the parents run up and they hug the kid. And he hugs his parents. Rabotai, the old man on the radio in Israel says, "My friend, everyone at that time when he ran in the street, we thought he was crazy. At that time we thought he was out of his mind. At that time we thought with this obsession that he had to speak to the king, that he was totally nuts. Who jumps in the middle of the street? Who stops the king's car? Who runs up to the king's window? Who tells the king whatever he was telling him? We thought he was crazy. But you know what?" says the old man. "His parents were saved, and none of our parents lived to see any of us again." Rabotai, Hamelech Basadeh Va'anachnu lo na'aleh. That's a question. Hamelech Basadeh. You know what that means, that expression of Chazal? Hamelech Basadeh. The king is in the field. That means he's accessible. He's accessible. Va'anachnu lo na'aleh. We're not going to grab the opportunity to be able to talk to the king. A one-on-one face encounter. Lifnei Hashem titaru. That's the titaru. Lifnei Hashem. I get the face-to-face experience. What are you going to do with it? Do you believe in your tefillot? Do you believe that this is an opportunity of a lifetime that comes once a year, and if you don't get it now, you'll lose it? If you believe that when it comes to the Al-Chet, you'll cry over the Lifanecha. Al-Chet shechatanu. Yes, I sinned, but I sinned even worse, Lifanecha, in front of your face. And now I'm coming on the day of in front of your face, and I'm asking forgiveness in front of you, Hashem. This is the greatest Lifanecha experience. Ladies and gentlemen, Hamelech Basadeh Va'anachnu na'aleh. We're going to fight for this. We're going to own this. There's going to be all different types of things that are going to try to throw you off. I'm telling you straight up, you're going to see. And you're going to fight your way through it to get that one moment of connection. But when you hit that moment, own it. Pull your heart out. Know what you want to say. Have it clear. Out on a paper. Everything I need. Everything I don't want. Everything I want to get rid of in my life that I'm having hard times getting rid of. And all the things that I would like that I'm having hard time to get it out. Because that moment is coming. It's up to you. We should be zocheh this year. That we can hit the moment of connection to Borei Olam. On the year of Shemitah. This should be Tafshin Pebet. Teheh Shenat Parnasa B'Shefa. It should be a year of tremendous beracha, but it starts with what you're going to do and what you're going to fight for. Comes tomorrow night. Gmar Hatima Tova, Shana Tova Borechet.